The night had grown still, save for the quiet murmur of leaves swaying in the forest wind. The stars above scattered their silver fire across the heavens, while the soft breath of autumn lingered in the air. Upon a gentle rise beneath the towering oaks, a campfire whispered its golden crackle, sending ribbons of warmth through the cool night. Beside it sat a knight, his armor resting on the grass like the discarded weight of another life. The firelight traced the tired lines of his face, young yet weathered by battle and the long roads of duty. His name was Sir Aldrich of Harrowmere, once a sworn sword of the royal court, now wandering beyond its marble walls. Opposite him sat a lady cloaked in deep blue velvet, the hood drawn loosely over her hair. Her hands, pale as morning frost, held a cup of warmed wine. The firelight shimmered in her eyes that knew secrets and sorrow, yet held the stillness of water untouched by wind. She was Princess Elowen, daughter of King Halric of Edwin. The forest around them seemed to hush, as though the night itself leaned close to listen. Aldrich spoke first, his voice a low rumble softened by reverence. "I never thought the road to peace would be lit by a single flame." Elowen smiled faintly. "Nor did I. Yet here we are, no throne, no guards, no golden hall. Only the fire and the stars who keep our secrets." For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not empty. It was a space woven with warmth and understanding. The fire cracked again, and sparks drifted upward like tiny prayers. Aldrich's eyes lingered on her face, though he tried not to. She was still dressed as she had fled, her gown torn at the hem, her jewels hidden away. Days ago he had found her in the wild hills beyond Edwin's border, a lone rider pursued by those loyal to her father's enemies. He had fought to protect her, though he barely knew her name then. Since that night, their path had become one. The knight broke a stick in half, tossing it into the fire. "I should have brought finer shelter than this," he said quietly. "A princess deserves more than cold ground." Elowen looked up at him, her gaze steady. "A princess deserves peace, and for the first time in years, I have found it here." The words hung softly in the air. Aldrich turned to meet her eyes, and something within him yielded, like a sword being lowered after too long a battle. In the distance, the faint sound of a nightingale trembled through the branches. Elowen tilted her head to listen. "Even the birds sing of rest tonight." "Perhaps," Aldrich murmured, "they sing for you." Her lips curved with quiet amusement. "You speak kindly, Sir Knight. Yet I think the song belongs to the world, not to me alone." He smiled, the faintest flicker of warmth in his weathered face. "Still, the world seems brighter when you smile." Elowen looked into the fire then, her expression unreadable. "You should not speak thus," she said softly. "Were my father's court to hear it, they would deem it treason." "Then let the night take my confession," Aldrich replied. "For the moon is gentler than any king." Their laughter mingled, soft and fleeting. The wind rustled through the trees like the brush of silk. For a while, they spoke of simple things: the road ahead, the stars that looked like silver coins scattered across the sky, the fragrance of the pines. Aldrich shared tales of his travels, the markets of far cities, the quiet chapels of mountain hermits, the times he had fought for lords whose names he no longer remembered. Elowen listened as though each word were a lullaby. "You have seen more of the world than I ever will," she said, "and yet you speak of it as if it were lonely." "It can be," he admitted. "A man may ride for 1,000 miles and never find what his heart seeks." She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what does your heart seek, Aldrich?" The question caught him like a sudden arrow. He looked at her, his hand frozen above the flame. For a heartbeat, all he could hear was the soft crackling of fire and the steady rhythm of his own heart. "I do not yet know," he said at last, his tone low and trembling. "But when I found you by the riverbank, I felt closer to the answer than ever before." Elowen lowered her gaze, her fingers brushing the edge of her cup. The firelight painted her face in hues of gold and rose. "You speak dangerously, my knight." "Perhaps," he said, "but truth often rides close beside danger." The forest sighed again, as though approving the moment. The stars above blinked brighter. Somewhere far off, an owl called, a lone, solemn note. Elowen lifted her eyes to the moon. "Do you believe in fate, Aldrich?" He thought for a long while before answering. "I believe in paths," he said finally. "Some we choose, some are laid before us. But perhaps the gentlest ones are those we find by accident. Like a princess lost in the woods," she murmured, "and the knight who happens upon her fire." He smiled faintly. "Aye, perhaps like that." The fire burned lower, and she shivered beneath her cloak. Without a word, Aldrich rose, removed his fur-lined mantle, and placed it gently around her shoulders. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the flame. "You'll take the cold upon yourself. I've faced colder nights," he said softly, "but never one so fair." Elowen's heart stirred, quietly, uncertainly, but truly. She wished to speak, yet no words came. Instead, she watched the flame dance and listened to the rhythm of the forest, feeling safe for the first time since she had fled the palace gates. The knight settled back beside her, the two of them close enough that their shoulders brushed through the folds of fabric. Silence fell once more, a tender silence that needed no filling. Above them, the moon climbed higher, casting its pale blessing upon the clearing. And in that moment, neither was prince nor knight, nor fugitive nor guardian. They were simply two souls, drawn together by the gentle mercy of night. The fire crackled softly, the stars whispered overhead, and the forest, ancient and kind, kept their secret. Aldrich sat watching the fire's glow fade into gentle embers, his mind adrift in thought. He had known battlefields and oaths, storms at sea and nights with no stars. Yet none of those memories lingered with such strange warmth as this quiet night beside her. He could not tell what fate awaited them on the morrow, but for now, he wished only that dawn would come softly and late. The faint rustle of Elowen's cloak stirred him. She had fallen into a light doze, her head bowed slightly, her hair glinting like spun copper where the firelight touched it. For a moment, Aldrich did not move. The sight was too tender to disturb. But when the wind shifted, a cool draft swept across the clearing, and she shivered. Instinctively, he reached out, steadying the edges of her cloak around her shoulders. His gauntleted hand brushed her sleeve, and the contact sent a tremor through him, strange and innocent, yet deeper than any sword wound he had ever known. Elowen stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Did I sleep?" she whispered drowsily. Only for a breath, he said, "Rest, my lady. The road will be long come morning." Her gaze lingered on his face, softened by sleep. "And you? Will you not rest as well?" "I will keep watch," he murmured. "Old habit. The forest may seem kind, but I trust it only while it sleeps." Elowen smiled faintly, the curve of her lips warm and wistful. "Always the protector," she said, "even when there is no sword drawn." Aldrich looked away into the dark woods. "That is my calling." Her tone grew quieter, more fragile. "And if peace were your calling instead?" He did not answer. The question fell like a petal into silence. He had never imagined peace as something one could seek. It was always the reward of others, not of knights. Yet her words lingered, stirring an ache in him that had no name. The forest wind passed again, carrying the scent of pine and faraway rain. A single drop touched his cheek, cool as a kiss. He glanced up. Thin clouds were drawing across the moon. "It will rain before dawn," he said softly. Elowen lifted her eyes skyward, and a few moments later the first gentle patter began. Soft, rhythmic, almost musical. She did not retreat from it. Instead, she extended her hand, feeling the droplets land against her palm. "How strange," she said, smiling. "Even the sky weeps softly tonight." Aldrich rose and fastened the small canvas shelter above the fire, securing its poles. She watched him move, sure, patient, practiced, and felt a strange sense of comfort in the rhythm of his motions. There was something beautiful in his quiet diligence, in the way he worked, as though the world itself depended on her warmth. When the canopy was secured, he returned to her side, shaking the rain from his hair. The droplets clung to his lashes like crystals. "You'll be dry now, princess," he said gently. "Only if you share the warmth," she replied, half teasing, half earnest. He hesitated, uncertain, until she lifted one edge of the cloak and offered it to him. "Please," she said softly. "The fire is small, and I would not have my night grow cold for my sake." So he sat beside her, and the cloak fell around them both. The nearness of her presence filled the air between them like a heartbeat. The rain whispered on the canopy above, mingling with the soft crackle of the fire. The scent of rain and smoke and pine wove together, wrapping them in a cocoon of quiet. For a long time, neither spoke. The forest, too, seemed to listen. At last, Elwyn broke the silence. "Do you ever tire of your vows, my vows, to serve, to fight, to protect? Do you never wish to live for yourself?" He looked into the flame. "I would not know how." Her gaze turned distant. "I envy you that I was born into a life already chosen, but the choice was never mine. Duty, they called it. And yet I think duty has stolen more hearts than war ever has." Aldrich's brow furrowed. "You were not meant to flee your crown." She shook her head. "No, but neither was I meant to live a life written by others. I would rather wander with truth than rule with deceit." Her words carried the quiet fire of conviction, and Aldrich felt something stir in his chest, admiration, and a deeper tenderness he dared not name. "Then perhaps," he said slowly, "we are not so different. You fled a throne, I fled a sword, both of us seeking peace in the wilderness." Elwyn smiled at that. "And perhaps we have found it, at least for tonight." The rain thickened, drumming softly against the canvas. The fire dimmed, but its glow still kissed their faces with gold. Aldrich found himself watching her again, the way her lashes caught the light, the calm strength in her posture even at rest. She turned slightly toward him. "You look at me as though I am a dream." "Perhaps you are," he said, before he could stop himself. Elwyn's breath caught. "And if I vanish come dawn, then I shall dream no more," he whispered. The world seemed to still around them. The rain slowed, the fire crackled low, and time folded into silence. Elwyn's eyes glistened, not from tears, but from the reflection of that flickering flame. Without thought, Aldrich reached forward, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. His touch was reverent, unsure, but she did not pull away. The air between them grew softer, heavier with unspoken words. "Elwyn," he murmured, her name a prayer. She closed her eyes. "Yes, Aldrich, whatever tomorrow brings, know this. Your heart will never wander alone." Her lips parted slightly, her breath trembling. For a moment she said nothing. Then, with quiet certainty, she whispered, "And neither shall yours." They sat like that for a long time, two hearts beating softly beneath the same cloak, two souls bound not by oath nor crown, but by the simple grace of being understood. The night deepened, the rain faded, and the first pale light of dawn began to bloom at the edge of the sky. The forest woke slowly around them, each leaf glistening like a gem. Aldrich rose, fastening his sword belt, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "We should move before the riders find our trail," he said quietly. Elwyn stood beside him, drawing her cloak close. "Then let us go where the path is kind," she said, and as they stepped into the misty dawn, the fire behind them gave one last, gentle sigh, its smoke curling upward like a blessing, as though the forest itself wished them peace. The morning mist rose like silk from the forest floor, weaving through the branches as the first pale sun touched the world awake. Dew glimmered on the grass like 1,000 tiny mirrors, and the scent of rain lingered, fresh, clean, and almost holy. Aldrich led their small horse along the narrow woodland path, his armor wrapped in cloth to dull its gleam. Elwyn walked beside him, her cloak drawn close, the hem brushing softly against the damp leaves. Neither spoke for a while. The silence between them had grown gentle, no longer the silence of strangers, but that of two who shared the same breath of peace. Birdsong began to ripple through the trees. The world, once dark and uncertain, now seemed washed in silver hope. Elowen tilted her head upward, her expression serene. "It feels as though the earth has forgiven itself overnight," she murmured. Aldrich glanced toward her, a small smile breaking through his usual reserve. "Then may we follow its example." She returned the smile, faint but warm. A knight who speaks of forgiveness, surely a rare breed. "Perhaps," he said, "but even a sword longs for rest." Their journey carried them through the lower woodlands, where moss carpeted the stones and streams sang their endless songs. The kingdom of Edwin stretched far behind them now, hidden by the folds of hill and mist. Ahead lay the borderlands, quiet villages, forgotten shrines, and roads where the banners of kings no longer flew. By mid-morning, they reached a meadow. Sunlight poured through the clouds, scattering golden light upon the wet grass. Aldrich paused, scanning the horizon. "We are beyond the king's patrols," he said softly. "You are free here, my lady." Elowen turned in a slow circle, her cloak spinning lightly with her movement. "Free," she repeated, tasting the word as though it were a new language. "How strange it feels. All my life, I have been watched, praised, guarded, judged. Freedom feels too quiet." Aldrich nodded, his voice thoughtful. "Silence can be frightening until one learns to listen to it." They continued on, their steps falling into rhythm. Sometimes Aldrich would lift his gaze to watch the way her hair caught the light. Other times she would glance his way, studying the calm patience in his stride. Neither said what they were thinking, yet something wordless flowed between them, steady and sure, like a river finding its course. As the sun climbed, they stopped near a shallow brook to rest. Aldrich tended the horse, while Elowen knelt by the water's edge, letting the stream cool her fingers. She gazed at her reflection, the face of a princess no longer adorned with jewels, but soft and unguarded. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I look like someone else." Aldrich approached, crouching beside her. "You look as the world intended you to be," he said, "free of its crowns and chains." She turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "Do you always speak so gently?" He smiled faintly, only when the truth allows it. Her laughter was soft, like a melody carried by wind. "Then I hope the truth lingers often." They shared bread and dried fruit beside the brook, simple fare that somehow felt like a feast. Aldrich's heart swelled with quiet contentment as he watched her. No royal table could have offered such grace as her smile in that golden light. When they set out again, the forest thinned into rolling hills. The air grew warmer, the grass taller. Somewhere in the distance, a shepherd's flute echoed faintly, its tune wandering through the breeze. Elowen slowed her pace, listening. "It sounds like longing," she whispered, "or memory," Aldrich replied. "Perhaps both are the same." They reached the crest of a hill where the land opened wide, revealing the distant outline of a ruined watchtower. Aldrich pointed toward it. "We can rest there tonight. It will give us shelter and a view of the roads below." The walk was long, but the quiet between them was companionable. They spoke of small things, flowers, constellations, the curious names travelers gave to places. Aldrich told her how knights once swore oaths beneath that very tower in the old wars, when loyalty was a lantern carried through endless night. "And did those oaths endure?" Elowen asked softly. He hesitated. "Some did, others flickered and died, as lanterns do when the wind grows cruel." "Then perhaps," she said, "we must learn to shelter our own lights." By the time they reached the ruins, evening had fallen. The tower stood half-collapsed, wrapped in ivy, its stones worn smooth by centuries of rain. Inside, they found a sheltered corner where moss softened the ground. Aldrich gathered wood, while Elowen arranged their small belongings, humming quietly to herself. When the fire caught, its light painted the old stones with warmth once more. The tower that had seen battles and broken vows now held only 2 travelers, and a flame that spoke of peace. Elowen sat close to the fire, her hands extended toward the heat. "Strange," she said softly, "how every fire feels like the same one, as if each flame remembers the last." Aldrich looked into the firelight, thoughtful, Perhaps they do. Perhaps that is why fire brings comfort, because it carries memory. She nodded slowly, her gaze distant. Then may it remember this night kindly. Outside, the first stars began to bloom in the darkening sky, and the wind whispered through the broken tower like the faint echo of a harp. Aldrich turned toward her, his expression softened by the glow. "Do you regret leaving the castle?" he asked quietly. Elowen was silent for a moment. Then she said, "No, only that I did not leave sooner." The fire in the ruined tower crackled softly, throwing gold against the ancient stones. Beyond the doorway, night stretched like a velvet sea, the stars glinting through the collapsed roof where ivy trailed down like the fingers of time. Aldrich sat beside Elowen, the quiet between them shaped by the steady rhythm of flame and wind. "You left everything behind," he said after a while. "A kingdom's daughter is not meant for wandering roads." Elowen smiled faintly, tracing the rim of her cup. "And yet here I sit, unscathed, unchained. Perhaps I was never meant for gilded walls. Perhaps I was meant to breathe." Her words drifted like incense through the tower. Aldrich felt them settle in his chest. "Your father will send riders," he warned gently. "He will not rest until you are found." "I know." Her gaze remained on the fire. But even a king cannot chase every dream his daughter dares to follow. Aldrich studied her profile, the calm strength in her jaw, the faint shimmer of tears she would never let fall. "Then let us hope the world proves kinder than courts." A soft breeze swept through the opening, and the fire leaned toward them as if to listen. Elowen's cloak fluttered, brushing his shoulder. She did not move away. "You speak as though you have known cruelty," she said. "I have known orders," he replied. "Cruelty is only the shadow they cast." Her eyes found his. "And now? Who commands you?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Perhaps the wind. It leads me where duty never could." She laughed quietly, a sound as light as falling rain. "Then I am grateful the wind led you to me." They sat until the moon reached its height, silvering the stones, the warmth of the fire, and the hush of the night folded around them like a spell. Aldrich removed his gauntlets, setting them aside, and for the first time in years his hands were bare before another soul. Elowen reached out, her fingers brushing the scars along his knuckles. "Every mark tells a story," she said softly. "Stories I'd sooner forget," he murmured. "Then let them rest. You need not carry them tonight." Her touch lingered only a moment, yet it felt eternal. Aldrich closed his eyes, the weight of years lifting like mist from the heart. When dawn crept upon the horizon, pale gold filtered through the tower's broken crown. Birds stirred in the ivy. Aldrich woke to find Elowen already standing by the doorway, her cloak drawn, her face lit by the first light. She looked like something the sun itself had conjured. He rose quietly, fastening his sword belt. "We should move early," he said. "The roads will grow busy once the farmers wake." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on the view, the endless stretch of green and silver hills. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I never knew the world could look so wide." "It was always wide," Aldrich said, "but few are free to see it." They descended the hill, the grass still wet beneath their boots. The horse snorted softly, steam rising from its breath. Aldrich helped her mount, his hand steady at her waist. The warmth of her body, the brief meeting of breath, stirred something deep and wordless between them. By mid-morning they came upon a small hamlet tucked beside a winding river. Smoke rose from a few cottages, and the scent of bread drifted through the air. Children's laughter echoed faintly, mingling with the clatter of hooves on cobblestone. Elowen watched the simple life unfold. "They know nothing of crowns or courts," she said with wonder, "only of mornings and harvests." "Perhaps that is why they seem at peace," Aldrich replied. He led her to a stone bridge where wildflowers grew between the cracks. The river beneath ran clear, the sunlight dancing across its ripples. They paused there, and Elowen leaned upon the rail, her gaze lost in the flowing water. "In the castle," she said quietly, "time never moved. Each day repeated itself beneath gold and marble. But here, even the river seems alive. Aldrich nodded. The world breathes beyond the walls we build. She turned toward him, her eyes bright. Tell me, Aldrich, if you could live anywhere, where would you choose? He thought for a long moment. A small house near the edge of a forest, he said at last. A hearth that never goes cold. A garden, perhaps, and the sound of water close by. She smiled. And would you live there alone? His gaze met hers. Once, I would have said yes. The words hung between them, unfinished but understood. The river murmured below, carrying their silence downstream. They lingered in the village long enough to rest the horse and share a meal of bread, cheese, and honey. The innkeeper, a kindly woman with gray braids, asked no questions. To her, they were simply travelers, a weary knight and his lady companion. For that brief hour, the illusion felt real. As they prepared to leave, the innkeeper pressed a small charm into Eloin's hand, a token carved of wood, shaped like a heart within a shield. For safe journeys, she said, and for love that endures the road. Eloin thanked her softly, her eyes glimmering. When they rode away, she held the charm close. What did she give you? Aldrich asked. A blessing, she said, for us both. The path beyond the village led into open country. Fields stretched wide beneath the afternoon sun, and larks sang high above. Eloin rode in silence for a time, then spoke, her voice distant. Do you think love can survive the world? Aldrich's answer came slowly. If it is true, it does not need to survive it. It becomes part of it. She turned to him, the wind lifting her hair. Then let it be part of ours. He looked at her, really looked, and the world around them seemed to still. No court, no battle, no oath could match the quiet certainty in her words. As the sun dipped low, they reached a ridge overlooking the distant plains. The sky flared with amber and rose, and the wind carried the scent of wild thyme. Aldrich dismounted, offering his hand to her. She took it without hesitation. Together they stood at the edge of the world they no longer belonged to, the fire of sunset upon their faces, and for that moment, brief, eternal, they were neither fugitive nor knight, neither princess nor protector. They were simply two hearts unbound, walking the road beyond Edwin. The road bent eastward toward the low valleys where the riverlands began, a place of willow groves, soft green fields, and the eternal music of flowing water. Here the air smelled of damp earth and wild mint, and the sky seemed closer to the ground, heavy with slow-drifting clouds. Aldrich and Eloin rode beside the river, their reflections wavering upon the surface. The horses' hooves made soft thuds against the wet soil, and the murmur of water filled the space between their words. It was a gentle day, the kind that asked for no haste. Eloin's eyes followed the ripples. The river seems endless, she murmured. It winds through half the realm, Aldrich replied. The old folks say it remembers every secret whispered upon its banks. Then we must speak kindly near it, she said with a smile. They stopped at a shallow ford where the water flowed clear as glass. Aldrich dismounted, leading the horse through the stream. The current lapped around his boots, glinting in the sunlight. Eloin lifted her skirts and stepped carefully across, laughing softly as the cold water brushed her ankles. You smile, Aldrich said, watching her. I had forgotten how laughter feels, she admitted. In the court, it was never free, but here, it comes without permission. He nodded. The forest, the river, they ask nothing of us but honesty. They crossed to the far bank, where the ground rose into soft meadows dotted with wildflowers. Aldrich gathered dry reeds for the horse, while Eloin wandered a few paces ahead, her gaze drawn to the open horizon. There was something in her bearing, grace mixed with a quiet strength, that made her seem not fragile, but luminous. Tell me, she said after a while, when you first swore your vows, did you ever imagine the world beyond the castle walls? Aldrich's eyes softened. No, I thought the world ended where the banners ended. Every road led back to duty, and now he looked toward the river, its silver threads winding away into mist. Now I see there are roads that lead toward peace. Perhaps that is a knight's truest duty, to find one and walk it." Eloin's smile touched him like sunlight. "Then we are both oath-breakers," she said gently, "and perhaps that is our redemption." They rested beneath a willow whose branches draped low like green curtains. Aldrich kindled a small fire and warmed a pot of herb broth. The smoke rose thin and pale, vanishing into the soft sky. Eloin sat opposite him, her cloak drawn loosely, her hair spilling like copper threads over her shoulders. "You know," she said, "I used to dream of running away. I'd imagine the wind on my face, the sound of the forest. But dreams fade when one wakes beneath marble ceilings." He stirred the pot slowly. "And yet you woke from that dream into this one." Her gaze met his across the fire. "If this is a dream," she said softly, "I pray never to wake." The moment lingered. The river whispered, and the fire's glow brushed her cheek. Aldrich felt the stir of words unsaid, but he let them rest. There was beauty in the silence, too. After they ate, Eloin drew a small piece of parchment from her cloak, a fragment torn from a letter. She traced the faded ink with her finger. "What is that?" Aldrich asked gently. "My mother's handwriting," she said. "A single line she left for me. Seek the quiet places, they will remind you who you are." She died before I understood what it meant. Aldrich bowed his head slightly. She must have been wise. "She was kind," Eloin said, "and kindness is rarer than wisdom." They fell quiet again, listening to the steady hum of water and the sighing of willows. The afternoon drifted by, lazy and golden. As dusk approached, they followed the river to a small stone bridge half swallowed by ivy. Beside it stood an abandoned chapel, its windows empty, its roof half fallen. "Here we'll rest," Aldrich said. The interior was hushed, filled with the faint scent of old incense and rain. Broken pews lay scattered, and moss crept along the walls. Yet in the corner stood a single unbroken window, through which the last rays of sunset fell like a benediction. Eloin knelt beside the window, her hand resting on the cold stone. "Do you think the saints still listen here?" she whispered. Aldrich looked at the fading light. "If they do, I think they listen kindly." She smiled, and her gaze softened. "Then I will speak to them, not as a princess, but as a woman who wishes to be remembered gently." He said nothing, but watched her as she closed her eyes, her lips moving in silent prayer. The glow of evening wrapped around her like a halo, and for a moment Aldrich felt he was looking upon something sacred, not a saint carved in glass, but something living, breathing, and profoundly human. When she finished, she turned toward him, her eyes calm. "What did you pray for, Aldrich? When you were still a knight of the court?" He thought for a moment. "Victory, honor, the favor of my lords. I prayed for all the wrong things." "And now?" she asked gently. He looked at her, his voice low. "Now I pray only that you find peace." Eloin's breath caught, and for an instant the world seemed to still. No river, no wind, only the quiet meeting of their hearts. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the chapel filled with blue twilight. The fire they built in the doorway flickered softly, its light reflected in the river outside. They spoke no more that night. The silence said everything. The night settled deep and serene around the ruined chapel. The firelight played softly upon the broken stone, dancing like memories upon forgotten walls. Beyond the doorway, the river moved in silver currents, murmuring secrets too ancient to name. Aldrich sat near the flame, polishing his sword with quiet, measured strokes. The blade caught the glow and shimmered faintly, though it was no longer the weapon of a courtly knight. It was a traveler's blade now, a companion to silence and shadow. Eloin lay upon her cloak beside the hearth, her head pillowed on her arm. The glow of the fire traced her face in gold, outlining her lashes and the gentle curve of her lips. She watched him without speaking, as though his every motion carried a story. After a while, she said softly, "You care for your blade as though it were a living thing." In a way it is, Aldrich replied. It remembers the weight of every choice I've made. Steel does not forget. Then it must be heavy indeed, she murmured. He paused, his hand resting upon the hilt. It is, but tonight it feels lighter. Because you've laid your burdens by the fire? Because, he said, looking up at her, I've found company worth carrying them for. Her gaze lingered upon him, and a warmth kindled in her chest that was gentler than desire, something steadier, quieter. She turned her eyes toward the river. When I was a child, she said, I used to pretend the river spoke to me. It told stories, some sad, some kind. I think it pitied me, for even then I was lonely. Lonely in a castle full of people? Aldrich asked. Loneliness hides best in crowds, she said softly. One may dine among nobles and yet starve for a single honest voice. Aldrich looked at her for a long moment, then said, You have mine, always. The fire crackled gently. The words hung between them, fragile and true. Elowen closed her eyes, listening to the soft rhythm of water beyond the walls. Tell me a story, Sir Aldrich, she whispered. Something from your journeys. He smiled faintly. Most of my stories are dull things. Marches, oaths, long winters. Then tell one that isn't dull to the heart. He looked into the flames. Once, on the northern border, I rode with a company of knights to guard the mountain passes. There was a village there, small and forgotten. The people were poor, but every evening they lit lanterns along the riverbank. Hundreds of them, floating down the current. They said the lights were messages to the lost, words they could no longer speak aloud. I asked an old woman why she lit hers each night, and she told me, because love cannot cross mountains, but light can. Elowen's eyes shimmered. Did you light one too? I did, he said quietly, though I had no one to send it to. She reached out, brushing her fingers against his hand where it rested on his knee. You do now, she whispered. He looked at her, the world narrowing to the space between them. The crackle of flame, the pulse of breath, the river's sigh. He took her hand gently, his rough palm enveloping her slender fingers. Neither spoke. Outside, the wind rose through the willows, threading through the open window with a sound like distant song. The chapel seemed to breathe with them, old stone and living hearts sharing the same quiet rhythm. At length, Aldrich said, Tomorrow we'll follow the river toward the hills. Beyond them lies the Vale of Lindenwood. There's a monastery there, long abandoned. We can rest there before deciding what comes next. Elowen nodded, her eyes still fixed upon his. And after? He hesitated. After, perhaps the world will decide for us. She smiled faintly. I'd rather it didn't. The world rarely chooses kindly. Aldrich's hand tightened around hers. Then we'll choose for ourselves. The fire burned low, sinking into embers. Shadows lengthened, wrapping them in soft darkness. Elowen leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice a whisper. If the saints truly listen tonight, she said, I think they would envy us. He smiled into her hair. Then let them listen forever. The rest of the night passed in silence, peaceful, weightless silence. The river kept its watch. The stars wheeled overhead, and in the chapel's hollow heart, two souls rested side by side, not as knight and princess, but as two weary wanderers who had found, at last, a moment of stillness in the turning of the world. When dawn came, soft and pale, the mist hung low over the riverlands. Dew beaded on the grass like scattered glass. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint song of birds waking among the reeds. Aldrich stirred the fire to life again, while Elowen gathered her cloak. The light touched her hair, and for an instant, she seemed carved of morning itself. Do you ever wish to return? He asked quietly. She looked toward the distant hills. To the castle? He nodded. She thought for a moment, then said, I think part of me will always belong there, as a ghost might belong to the place it died. But I cannot live in marble halls when my heart has learned the language of rivers. Aldrich smiled. Then may the river never fall silent. She looked at him, her eyes bright with both sorrow and peace. "If it ever does, I'll know you've stopped listening." He stepped closer, adjusting the clasp of her cloak where it had slipped loose. His fingers brushed her collarbone, a touch as light as breath. "Then I will listen until the end of my days." They stood a moment longer beneath the soft morning light, the chapel's broken arch framing them like the memory of a prayer. Then, together, they turned their steps eastward, following the silver thread of the river toward whatever fate awaited them beyond the hills. The willows whispered behind them as if bidding farewell, and the old stones of the chapel held their secret like a blessing left behind. The hills rose like waves upon the earth, their slopes softened by spring grasses and veiled in morning mist. The road wound slowly upward, and with each step, the air grew cooler, touched by the scent of pine and rain. Aldrich led the horse while Elowen walked beside him, her hand brushing the worn leather of the saddle. The world was hushed except for the rhythm of their steps and the far-off call of a lark. By midday, they reached a high ridge where the land fell away into a valley washed in gold. There, half hidden by linden trees, stood the monastery of Lindenwood, its spires bowed, its roofs broken, yet its heart still serene. The ruins were embraced by wildflowers. Bees drifted lazily among them, and vines climbed the walls like green lace. The great doors hung crooked upon their hinges, and the courtyard beyond was filled with sunlight and silence. "This place has been long asleep," Elowen whispered. Aldrich nodded. "And yet it dreams still. Listen." She tilted her head. The faintest sound reached her ears, a low hum, like the echo of distant chanting. It was not quite real, yet it lingered, threading through the rustle of leaves. They entered the courtyard. At its center stood a fountain, dry and cracked, but still shaped with delicate carvings of angels and vines. Elowen traced one of the figures with her fingers. "Even in ruin, there's grace," she said. "Ruin does not erase holiness," Aldrich murmured. "It only softens it." They explored the cloisters. Sunlight fell in shards through broken arches, painting the floor with gold. Birds had made nests in the rafters. A hare darted across the stones and vanished into the undergrowth. At last, they found a small chamber still intact. The door creaked but held, and inside the air was cool and faintly perfumed with moss. A narrow window looked out upon the valley. Dust hung in the light like drifting petals. "This will shelter us," Aldrich said, laying down his pack. "For a night, perhaps two." Elowen smiled softly. "A monastery for two heretics." He chuckled. "Then let us be faithful only to peace." They cleared the floor and built a small fire in the hearth. Its light flickered across the walls, illuminating faded frescoes of saints with kind faces and gentle eyes. As evening fell, Elowen wandered to the window. "The valley reminds me of my childhood," she said. "Before court life, before titles, my father would take me riding through the meadows at dawn. I remember how the world smelled then. Wet grass, wild thyme, the smoke of morning fires. Memory is its own country," Aldrich said softly, "and we are travelers there." She turned to him. "Do you ever go back to yours?" "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I find the roads there grow fainter each year. War teaches a man to look forward, not back. Yet you still remember peace," she said. "Because you remind me," he replied simply. A pause. The fire crackled, and in that quiet moment the bond between them deepened, not through grand declarations but through understanding. Theirs was a love born of stillness, patient as the turning of the seasons. Later, Aldrich stepped outside to fetch more wood. The night had fallen soft and silver, and the linden trees swayed gently in the wind. He looked up. The sky was vast, jeweled with stars, and for the first time in many years he felt no weight in his heart. When he returned, Elowen was humming softly, a tune from her youth, half forgotten. Her voice was low, fragile but beautiful, as though the song itself feared to disturb the silence. Aldrich set the wood down and listened. "What is it called?" he asked when she finished. "It has no name," she said. "My nursemaid used to sing it when I could not sleep." She said it would keep dreams gentle. He smiled. Then you should sing it every night. She looked at him through the firelight. Only if you promise to listen. Always, he said, and meant it. They dined on simple bread and fruit, and afterward, Elowen wrapped her cloak around her shoulders and settled by the window. The wind played through the linden leaves like a harp. Do you think, she asked softly, that the monks who once prayed here found what they sought? Aldrich considered. Perhaps, but I think peace isn't found. It's remembered, like the song you just sang. Her smile was wistful. Then may we never forget. Outside, a faint mist rose from the valley. The moon climbed higher, spilling silver through the window. It touched the floor, the walls, and her face, until she seemed woven of moonlight itself. Aldrich watched her, and something in him stirred, a feeling both tender and infinite. He did not speak it, he only let it live quietly within him, the way a prayer lives in the heart before it finds words. Dawn arrived in quiet gold. The first light spilled across the broken cloisters, painting the ancient stones with warmth. Birds called from the linden trees, their songs mingling with the soft rush of wind through the valley. Elowen woke first. She lay still for a moment, listening to the hushed breath of the world beyond the walls. Then she rose and went to the window. Mist veiled the fields below, drifting in ribbons like silk. For the first time in many years, she felt no fear of the day ahead. Aldrich stirred behind her. You greet the morning as though it were a friend, he murmured. Perhaps it is, she said, turning with a faint smile. It has found us still together. He stood and fastened his cloak, the leather creaking softly. The world feels different when shared. They broke their fast with wild berries, and the last of the bread. The air in the monastery seemed gentler by daylight, filled with motes of light that danced like quiet spirits. Aldrich found a rusted bell in the courtyard and rang it once, for the sake of remembrance. Its tone was low and sorrowful, yet oddly comforting. Even ruin can still sing, Elowen said. He looked at her, sunlight catching in her hair, as can those who have lost much. They walked through the valley after breakfast, exploring the monastery's outer grounds. Here, the stones of fallen walls lay carpeted with moss, and narrow paths wound between patches of lavender and clover. Once, this place had been full of prayer and study, but now it belonged to time and silence. Elowen paused beside an ancient oak, its roots twisting deep into the earth. Do you think the monks ever missed the world beyond? She asked. Perhaps, Aldrich said. But they must have found beauty here too, different from the world's kind, but no less real. She rested her hand on the trunk. I envy them a little. To belong wholly to a place, to a purpose. He smiled gently. And yet, if you had stayed behind your castle walls, you would have never seen this morning. Elowen looked up at him, her eyes clear, nor met the man who makes it beautiful. He reached for her hand and held it lightly, neither of them speaking. The breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, and somewhere nearby a brook murmured among the stones. They returned to the chapel before noon. Aldrich found a broken harp lying in the choir loft, its strings long since rusted. Yet when he touched it, one string still sang faintly. He plucked it again, and the note lingered in the air, trembling like memory. Elowen closed her eyes. It sounds like the heart, fragile but alive. He set the harp gently back. So long as it plays, the monastery is not entirely forsaken. They spent the afternoon tending to small things, sweeping dust from the chamber floor, gathering fallen branches, restoring a fragment of order to the ruin. There was a quiet joy in the labor, a sense that they were not only mending the place, but something within themselves. As dusk came on, Aldrich lit the hearth once more. The valley outside darkened into shades of violet and blue. Fireflies drifted near the window, their light flickering like stray stars. Elowen knelt beside the fire, her hands outstretched to its warmth. Do you ever wonder, she said softly, if we were meant to find this place? Aldrich considered her words. Perhaps places find us when we need them most. She smiled faintly. Then the world is kinder than I thought. For a long while, they sat in silence. The fire's glow wove gold into the air. Aldrich leaned back against the wall, his sword across his knees, watching her. She seemed at peace now, her eyes half-lidded, her breath slow, her face calm. "You are thinking," she murmured. "I can see it in your eyes." He smiled, only wondering what tomorrow will bring. "Then let tomorrow wait," she said gently. "This night is enough." He reached toward her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You make even silence feel like prayer." Her gaze met his, steady and soft. "Then let it be a prayer, for quiet days and gentle hearts." The world outside faded to darkness. Only the fire remained, whispering its tender hymn. Aldrich and Eloin sat close, the warmth between them steady as breath. Words had become unnecessary. Their hearts spoke in the language of stillness. Later, when she drifted to sleep beside him, Aldrich looked toward the window. The moon hung low over the valley, casting its silver light through the broken arch. He felt the pull of the road beyond the hills, the uncertain future waiting for them. But for now, he let it be. He drew his cloak around Eloin's shoulders and closed his eyes. The scent of linden filled the room. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of the harp's note, one last, lingering sound, neither sorrowful nor sweet, but simply alive. Thus the night passed, tender and unbroken. And when morning came again, the monastery would remember their voices in its stones, as if peace itself had paused there for a breath before moving on. They departed the monastery at dawn beneath a sky veiled in cloud. The air carried the scent of rain yet to fall, and the earth felt tender beneath their feet, as if the world itself breathed slower that morning. Eloin looked back once. The monastery stood silent among the linden trees, its stones softened by mist. "It seems to watch us go," she said. "Then let it remember us kindly," Aldrich replied. They followed the narrow road descending into the valley below. Grasses bent with dew. Droplets clung to every leaf like beads of glass. When the first drops of rain began to fall, it was a whisper rather than a storm, a fine, silvery drizzle that blurred the horizon and cooled their cheeks. They did not seek shelter. Instead, they walked through it, laughing softly as the rain kissed their hands. The world was washed of dust, the colors deepened, the green of moss, the dark gleam of wet stone, the silver shimmer of the river winding beside the road. "Do you know," Eloin said, "in the castle, when it rained, I would press my hand to the window and imagine I stood outside. The glass was cold, but I pretended it was the wind. Now I think the window itself was a kind of prison." Aldrich looked at her, rain threading through his hair. "And now you are free of glass and walls both." She smiled. "Then I will never again hide from the rain." They came upon a grove of birch trees where the road widened into a clearing. The rain fell gently through the pale branches, pattering like a lullaby upon the leaves. Aldrich tethered the horse beneath a broad tree, while Eloin spread her cloak upon the grass. The scent of wet earth rose around them, rich, clean, alive. For a while they said nothing. The rain spoke for them, soft and unhurried. Eloin tilted her face upward, letting the droplets trace her skin. "It feels as if the sky weeps not from sorrow, but from kindness," she whispered. Aldrich's gaze softened. Even the heavens must empty their hearts sometimes. He unfastened his cloak and draped it around her shoulders. She looked at him, eyes bright beneath the gray light. "You'll be cold," she said. "I have warmth enough," he answered simply. They lingered beneath the birches until the rain thinned to mist. The valley stretched before them. Rolling meadows, streams glinting like ribbons of light, cottages far in the distance with smoke curling from their chimneys. Life, quiet and steady. "Have you ever wished to disappear?" Eloin asked suddenly. He thought for a moment. "Many times. Yet each time I did, someone found me. Duty, command, war. And now..." He looked at her. "Now I think if I disappeared, you would follow." She smiled softly. "I would, for I no longer know where I end and you begin." He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. The rain had left everything gleaming, from the blades of grass to the edges of their soles. By afternoon, they reached a small village nestled beside the river. Smoke rose from hearths, and the air smelled of baking bread and damp wool. The villagers, humble folk in plain clothes, greeted them with cautious kindness. To them, the knight and the woman in traveler's cloak were simply wanderers seeking warmth. An old innkeeper welcomed them into his hearth hall, a low room of stone and timber, its beams dark with age. A great fire burned at the center, and the scent of stew filled the air. Aldrich paid with a silver coin, and the man's face brightened at the sight. "You'll find no trouble here," the innkeeper said kindly. "Only good sleep and honest rain." Eloin smiled. "That is all we could ask for." They ate by the fire, surrounded by the murmur of quiet voices and the clatter of bowls. It was a simple meal, bread, broth, and roots. But to them, it felt like feast and sanctuary alike. As the evening deepened, Aldrich played with a small wooden flute he found upon the mantel. Its tone was rough, but when he lifted it to his lips, it gave a soft, wandering melody. Eloin listened with her chin resting on her hands, her eyes glowing in the firelight. "I didn't know you could play," she said when the tune ended. "I learned in the barracks," he replied, "when the nights were too long and silence too heavy." "Then play again," she whispered. "Play until the silence becomes gentle." He smiled faintly and obeyed. The music drifted through the hall, blending with the patter of rain upon the roof. Villagers turned their heads, listening quietly. The melody was neither sad nor merry. It was the sound of distance and longing, of hearts traveling through the same endless world. When he finished, the innkeeper clapped him on the shoulder. "That tune could charm the clouds themselves," he said. "You'll bring fair weather by dawn, I'll wager." Eloin laughed softly, her eyes meeting Aldrich's. "Then play again tomorrow, and perhaps the sun will follow us." Morning arrived like a breath of silver. The clouds parted to reveal a pale sun, and the rain had gentled into a fine mist that drifted above the meadows. The inn's shutters stood open, letting in the smell of wet earth and baking bread. Eloin woke to the faint tune of the flute. Aldrich was playing softly by the window. The melody wound through the air like the morning fog, half lullaby, half memory. "You truly did charm the clouds away," she said, smiling sleepily. He turned toward her, or perhaps they simply pitied us. She rose and crossed the room, her bare feet silent upon the wooden floor. "No," she said. "The world is learning to be kind to us." Outside, the village stirred to life. Children ran through puddles, their laughter echoing between the cottages. Women hung damp clothes upon lines, and the blacksmith's hammer began its steady song. It was a morning of simple labors, and for the first time, Eloin felt she could belong in such a world. They thanked the innkeeper and set out once more, the road leading them farther into the valley. The mist clung low, parting in swirls around their steps. Every leaf and stone glistened with dew. As they walked, Eloin asked, "If you could lay down your sword forever, what would you do?" Aldrich thought for a while. "I would build a small home near water, plant trees, mend walls, live quietly, perhaps keep bees." She laughed softly. A knight turned beekeeper, the realm would not believe it. "Let them believe what they wish," she said. "Peace has its own armor, and I," she said, "would tend a garden beside your hive, grow herbs, roses, maybe a little lavender. The bees would love it." He looked at her then, his expression unreadable, though his voice softened when he spoke. "Then promise me this. If ever such a day comes, you'll plant lavender first." "I promise," she whispered. They walked until the sun reached its height. Along the way, they passed fields where peasants worked with patient rhythm. When they paused to rest, a farmer offered them apples from his cart, refusing payment. "You've the look of those traveling towards something worth finding," he said kindly. By late afternoon, they reached the far edge of the valley, where the river broadened and the land opened into rolling meadows. A single willow stood there, its branches sweeping low over the water. "Let us rest here," Aldrich said. They sat beneath the willow, watching the ripples drift past. The world felt suspended. Time itself seemed to slow. Eloin leaned against his shoulder, and he rested his arm lightly around her. "I think," she said softly, "that I could stay here forever." Aldrich looked at the river. "Forever is made of such moments, Eloin. We live them one by one." The wind stirred the willow leaves. They fell around them in small green flutters, catching in her hair. He reached up to free a strand, his fingers brushing her cheek. "You carry the scent of rain," he murmured. She smiled faintly. "And you, the warmth of the fire. Between us we have all seasons," he chuckled lowly. "Then the world itself must envy us." Evening drew near. Across the water, the horizon burned in gold and rose. The birds settled in the reeds, and the river sang its endless song. Eloin turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever think," she said, "that love is less a flame and more a tide, something that comes quietly, and when it stays it reshapes the shore?" Aldrich nodded slowly. "A tide, yes, and we are both the water and the sand." Her gaze softened. "Then let the tide stay." He kissed her hand, just once, reverently, as one might touch a relic. "It already has." For a while they sat without speaking, the light fading around them, the first stars trembling into being above. The river reflected them like scattered candles. When the night deepened, Aldrich built a small fire beneath the willow. Its glow rippled across the surface of the water, blending with the starlight. Eloin rested beside him, her cloak drawn close, her eyes heavy with peace. He watched the flames sway in the wind, and his thoughts drifted. Once he had known only the clamor of battle, the cries, the armor, the endless marching. Now, the world had fallen into a gentler rhythm, and he realized that perhaps this quiet companionship was the truest victory of all. Eloin stirred, half asleep. "What are you thinking?" "That if I were to die tomorrow," he whispered, "this night alone would have been enough." Her hand found his beneath the cloak. "Then promise me you will live tomorrow too." "I promise." They lay beneath the willow, the fire burning low. The rain had left the air fresh and sweet. The stars glimmered like distant bells. And as sleep slowly claimed them, the river carried their reflection downstream, two shapes bound by light and silence, resting together in the valley of soft rain. The next morning dawned, calm and silver blue. Mist lifted from the riverbanks like the breath of sleeping spirits. Aldrich and Eloin rose quietly beneath the willow tree, wrapped in each other's warmth and the hush of a world newly washed by night dew. For a time, neither spoke. They simply watched the light gather, the ripples gilded by dawn. Then Aldrich stirred the ashes of the fire and said softly, "Today we ride toward the road of lanterns." "The road of lanterns?" she asked, her voice still drowsy, as if waking from a dream. He nodded. "It is said to run through the southern woods, where travelers hang lamps to guide one another home. No two lights burn the same, yet each knows its purpose, to lead the lost." She smiled. "Then let us follow the lights, and perhaps they'll lead us somewhere the world forgets to look." They saddled their horse and rode at an easy pace. The valley gave way to low hills and tangled forest paths. The scent of pine and moss grew stronger, and the air held a hush that only old woods can keep. Shafts of sunlight streamed through the canopy, painting the path with gold and shadow. By noon, they reached the first lantern, an old bronze cage hanging from a branch, its flame small but steady. Then another appeared farther ahead, and another still, each casting a pool of soft amber upon the path. Eloin's eyes glimmered as the lights flickered past. "It feels as if the forest itself remembers us," she whispered. "Perhaps it does," Aldrich said. "Every flame is a memory kept alive." As they rode, the woods grew denser, the air fragrant with resin and damp leaves. Somewhere far off, a brook murmured, and birds called faintly among the branches. The sound of their horses' hooves softened on the mossy earth. Elowen rested her hand lightly on Aldrich's arm. "I used to think knights belonged only to battles and castles," she said. "But you—" He turned slightly toward her. "But me? You carry peace as if it were a sword." He smiled faintly. "Then it is the first weapon I have no wish to use." They paused beside a lantern that hung low, its glass cracked, its wick burning unevenly. Aldrich dismounted and adjusted it, shielding the small flame from the wind. "There," he murmured. "No light should falter while it can still be mended." Elowen watched him quietly. "You do the same for hearts, don't you?" He looked up, only one so far. Her smile was soft as dusk. The day passed in slow beauty. The forest opened at times into meadows sprinkled with wildflowers, then closed again into dim corridors of shadow and leaf. Each turn of the path revealed another lantern, some glowing strong, others dimmed by time. Together they tended a few, trimming the wicks, relighting the weary ones. It became a kind of prayer, a rhythm of care and silence. As evening approached, the road dipped into a hollow where a stream crossed the path. The water was shallow and clear, and hundreds of lanterns hung above it, swaying gently in the twilight breeze. Their reflections danced upon the surface like stars scattered upon glass. Elowen gasped softly. "It's like the heavens fell and found their home here." Aldrich helped her dismount, and together they waded into the stream, boots sinking into the cool current. The air shimmered with golden light. Lanterns of every shape surrounded them, some of brass, some of wood, some of simple clay, all glowing as though they had waited only for the two travelers to arrive. "Do you think each light belongs to someone?" she asked, looking around in wonder. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps they belong to those who need them most." She turned to him then, her expression touched by something deeper than joy, something like peace. "This one belongs to us." She reached for a small lantern hanging low over the stream and touched it gently. Its flame flickered brighter, casting a warm glow upon their faces. Aldrich stepped closer, and for a moment the world was only light and reflection. The murmur of water, the brush of their hands, the nearness of two souls learning the same quiet truth. He said her name softly, and she looked up. "Elowen." "Yes. When the wars ended, I feared the world would forget how to glow. But standing here with you, I see it burns brighter than ever." She lifted the lantern between them, and its light trembled. "Then may this flame be our witness." He reached out and steadied her hand, his fingers closing around hers. The flame steadied too, as though it understood. They stood there as dusk deepened into violet. The forest beyond grew hushed, and fireflies joined the lanterns, their brief sparks weaving between beams of gold. At last they left the stream and made camp upon a small rise overlooking the Valley of Lights. Aldrich built a modest fire, and its glow mingled with the countless lanterns below. The air smelled faintly of river and pine, and a soft wind rustled the leaves overhead. Elowen sat beside him, drawing her cloak around her shoulders. "It feels strange," she said. "Everywhere we go, the world feels newly born." "Perhaps it is," he murmured. "Perhaps the world renews itself for those who look gently upon it." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then let us never look any other way." The stars began to appear above the canopy, dim at first, then bold. Aldrich looked up at them and thought of the countless nights he had stared at such skies alone. Tonight, they no longer felt distant. "Do you hear it?" Elowen asked quietly. "Hear what?" "Silence," she whispered. "It no longer feels empty." And indeed, it was not. The silence had become full of warmth, of nearness, of all the words their hearts had learned to speak without sound. Night settled fully upon the forest. Yet the path of lanterns gleamed like a celestial river. Each flame shimmered with its own small song, a gentle harmony that turned the darkness kind. Aldrich and Elowen sat close beside the fire. Its warmth danced across their faces, and every so often, a flicker from the lanterns below would catch her hair, turning it to molten gold. The woods whispered all around them, the sigh of leaves, the hush of distant water, the occasional low hoot of an owl. Elowen's voice was soft when she finally spoke. When I was a child, I used to dream of a road made of stars. I'd walk upon it barefoot, and each step would light the next one. Tonight feels like that dream found its way to Earth. Aldrich smiled faintly. Perhaps dreams descend when they find the hearts patient enough to wait for them. She turned toward him. Then yours must have waited long. He looked into the fire, and his expression softened with memory. Too long, perhaps. I once believed peace was something given by kings or earned through battle. Now I see it was always meant to be found, in quiet places and in kind company. The flames crackled gently between them. Elowen reached out, tracing a small ember with her gaze. And in love? Aldrich's eyes lifted to hers, especially there. The night deepened, wrapping the world in silver and ember. Somewhere far off, a flute's echo drifted through the trees, faint, almost imagined. Elowen closed her eyes, listening. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Aldrich nodded. A traveler, perhaps, or a ghost of song left behind. "It sounds like longing," she said, "like someone searching for something they once loved." He watched her for a moment, the light of the fire soft upon her face. "Then let us hope they find it, as I have." The music faded, leaving only the murmur of the forest. When the last log burned low, Aldrich spread his cloak beside the fire, and they lay beneath the endless canopy. Lantern light filtered through the branches, trembling like soft rain. Elowen rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "Do you ever wonder," she said sleepily, "what the lanterns will remember of us?" "Perhaps," he said, "they will whisper that two wanderers once passed this way, one who carried hope and one who taught him how to keep it lit." She smiled against him. "Then we've left enough light behind." They slept in each other's arms as the forest kept watch, the flames of 1,000 lanterns swaying gently in the wind. At dawn, the forest shimmered in mist and gold. Dew clung to every branch, turning the lanterns into drops of morning fire. Birds began to stir. Their songs filled the air with fragile joy. Aldrich rose first, tending the embers until the faint smoke curled into the light. Elowen woke soon after, stretching like a cat in the warmth. Her hair glowed faintly in the dawn, and for a moment, he thought her more luminous than all the lanterns combined. They broke their fast with a small loaf of bread and wild berries gathered nearby. The taste was simple, sweet, alive. When they set out again, the forest opened before them like a blessing. The lanterns grew fewer, but their memory lingered in the soft gleam of the morning light. "Do you think," Elowen asked, "that the road will end soon?" "Every road ends somewhere," he said, "but some endings are only beginnings that learned patience." She tilted her head, smiling. "Then let ours be patient." They rode until noon, following the path as it wound through gentle slopes and shallow streams. Eventually the lanterns ceased altogether. Ahead lay an open meadow bathed in sunlight, and beyond it, distant hills crowned with ruins half swallowed by ivy. Aldrich drew rein at the edge of the clearing. "That was once a keep," he said softly, "a watchtower from the old wars." Elowen's gaze lingered on the crumbling stones. "Do you wish to see it?" He hesitated. "It may not be wise, but perhaps necessary," she murmured. "Sometimes peace asks us to face what came before." So they crossed the meadow, the grass whispering against their boots. As they neared the ruins, a faint wind rose, carrying the scent of time and old stone. The keep stood quiet, its archways hollowed by time, its battlements softened by vines. Aldrich ran his hand along the weathered stone. "I fought near here once," he said quietly. Men shouted, fires burned, and yet, look how the earth forgets. Elowen stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his. It doesn't forget, she said gently. It forgives. He turned toward her, the shadows of the ruins falling across his face. And you? Can you forgive the man I once was? She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes full of rain and sunlight both. I already have, she whispered, for that man led me to the one standing before me now. He bowed his head, overcome by something that felt like both sorrow and grace. Then perhaps I am free at last. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands. No, she said softly. Now you are found. And when their lips met, the old keep, once a place of war, seemed to breathe again. Wind swept through its corridors, scattering petals from some unseen bloom. The world, for that brief and endless moment, was whole. When they finally pulled apart, Elowen rested her forehead against his. Promise me, she murmured, that no matter where the road leads, we will follow its light. He smiled, his voice barely above a breath. Always. They lingered among the ruins until the sun began to set. Then, hand in hand, they turned southward once more. The last of the lanterns glowed faintly behind them, their flames small as stars at rest. And though the forest slowly gave way to open land, the memory of those lights stayed with them, each one a promise, each one a heartbeat, each one a quiet vow that love would find its path, even through the darkest night. The road from the ruins led them ever southward, through wild moorland and quiet stretches of heath. The air began to change, lighter, salt-touched, carrying the distant breath of the sea. By the third evening, they crested a rise, and there it was at last, the endless expanse of water, silver under the dusk, restless, yet serene. Elowen drew a soft breath. It feels alive, she murmured. Aldrich followed her gaze. It is. The sea never sleeps, it only dreams. They descended toward the coast, their path winding between dunes and wind-bent grasses. The sky stretched wide above them, brushed with hues of amber and violet. The cry of gulls echoed faintly, mingling with the rhythm of waves rolling upon the sand. When they reached the shore, Elowen removed her shoes and stepped barefoot into the tide. The foam curled around her ankles, cold and clean. It's as if the world has edges, she said, and we've come to stand upon them. Aldrich smiled softly. Then we'll watch the sun fall into the sea and see if it rises on the other side. They made camp not far from the shore, where a cluster of driftwood and rocks offered shelter from the wind. Aldrich built a small fire that burned steady despite the sea breeze. The sound of the waves was constant, a lullaby and a heartbeat in one. As they sat together, Elowen plucked a smooth stone from the sand, its surface cool beneath her fingers. Do you think, she asked, turning it in her hand, that every stone here once belonged to a mountain? Perhaps, he said, watching the horizon, worn down by time, carried by rivers, shaped by tides. Even stones learn gentleness. She smiled faintly. Then there's hope for hearts too. He looked at her then, his expression softening as the firelight caught her face. Hearts are made to endure the tide. Yours has weathered more than most. She turned toward him, her eyes glimmering in the dusk. And yours has carried me farther than I ever dreamed. For a while they spoke no more. The night unfolded quietly around them, wind sighing through the dunes, the sea whispering secrets no one could quite hear. After a long silence, Elowen said, When I was still in the castle, I would sometimes climb to the western tower and watch the horizon. I used to wonder what lay beyond it. Now I know. What did you find? She leaned her head against his shoulder. Peace, and you. Aldrich's arm encircled her, holding her close as the fire crackled low. The warmth mingled with the salt air, and every sound, the whisper of grass, the hush of waves, the steady beat of their hearts, seemed woven into one soft music. Later, when the stars appeared, they walked along the shore, hand in hand. Their footprints followed them, fading with each touch of the tide. The sea shimmered faintly beneath the moon, turning the world to silver. Elwyn paused, gazing out across the water. "Do you ever wonder where all the songs of the world go when they're sung?" she asked. Aldrich thought for a moment. "They become wind, and when the wind passes over the sea, it carries them forever." She closed her eyes, letting the breeze lift her hair, then let ours be carried too. He stepped behind her, resting his hands upon her shoulders. "What song would you give the wind?" "A promise," she whispered. "That love, once kindled, never truly fades." He drew her gently back against him, then let the sea bear witness. They stood like that a long while, wrapped in moonlight and the endless murmur of the waves. When they returned to their fire, the tide had drawn nearer. The flames flickered as the wind passed, scattering sparks like fleeting stars. Aldrich sat with his sword across his knees, its metal dull from the salt air. Elwyn touched the blade lightly. "Do you still need it?" He looked down at it, the weapon that had once defined him, now nothing more than memory and steel. "No," he said quietly, "not anymore." She smiled, then let it rest. He nodded. Together they carried it to the edge of the surf. The sea hissed softly around their feet as Aldrich lifted the sword one final time. "For every battle fought," he murmured, "and every peace yet to be kept." He released it, and the tide claimed it without sound. The water drew it away, and with it, the last shadow of the man he had been. Elwyn took his hand as they watched it vanish beneath the moonlight. "Now you are whole," she said. "Now," he whispered, "I am free." They returned to the fire, its glow faint against the vastness of the night. Elwyn rested her head upon his shoulder, and he wrapped his cloak around them both. The sea's whisper grew softer, as if it too were drifting into sleep. "Tell me," she murmured, eyes half closed, "if you could ask the sea one thing, what would it be?" He smiled faintly. "To remember this night, the sea kept its promise. When dawn came, it rose in hues of rose and pearl, the horizon a soft gleam between heaven and water. The tide had drawn smooth over the sand, erasing all trace of their footprints, save one faint mark where their fire had burned." Elwyn woke first, her hair tousled by the wind, her cloak brushed with salt. She watched the waves roll gently toward her, each one curling and folding as though bowing in greeting. Aldrich stirred beside her, blinking into the light. "You look as though the sea has told you its secrets," he murmured. "Perhaps it has," she replied, smiling. "It said it remembers you." He laughed quietly, sitting up. "Then I'm honored. The sea remembers few kindly." They shared a simple breakfast, a piece of bread, a few berries, and the taste of wind. Around them, the morning shimmered. The air was cool but sweet, and gulls wheeled overhead, their cries echoing like notes of an unseen song. Elwyn stood at the water's edge, gazing into the bright horizon. "Do you ever think," she said softly, "that the world feels wider than our lives could ever hold?" "Always," Aldrich said, coming to stand beside her. "But perhaps that's the mercy of it, that love is large enough to fill even what we cannot reach." She turned toward him, eyes shining. "Then we shall fill what we can." For much of that day they wandered the coastline, cliffs rising in gentle sweeps, meadows tumbling toward the surf, and gulls crying overhead like the ghosts of old sailors. At times they spoke, at times they did not. The silence between them was not emptiness but comfort. They came upon a small fishing village toward afternoon, cottages of stone and timber, their roofs dark with sea mist. Nets hung to dry upon poles, and the scent of salt and smoke filled the air. Children played in the shallows, their laughter ringing bright. An elderly woman greeted them as they entered the village. Her hair was white as sea foam, her face lined but kind. "Travelers?" she asked. "Yes," Aldrich said. "We seek a night's rest, and nothing more." "Then you'll find it here," she said, gesturing toward a small house near the shore. "My son sails at dawn, and his bed is free till he returns." They thanked her and followed her down a narrow path of sand and shell. Inside, the The small home smelled of wood smoke and lavender. Elowen touched the windowsill, where carved shells and driftwood charms hung from strings. "It feels alive," she whispered. "It feels loved," Aldrich said. That evening, they sat outside by the sea once more, as the sun dipped low and painted the waves in gold. The villagers lit their lamps one by one, and their glow mirrored upon the water, tiny reflections of the lantern road they had once followed. Elowen watched the lights tremble upon the tide. "It's as though the world remembers every flame we pass," she said softly. Aldrich nodded. "Every kindness leaves its echo." She turned to him, her voice barely above the sound of the surf. "Do you think we've left one behind?" He smiled. "You are one." Her breath caught, and she looked away, eyes glistening. "And so are you." The sea breeze carried their words out over the waves, where they mingled with the murmurs of the tide. Later, when the stars appeared, they lay upon the sand together. The night was mild, and the wind moved through the dunes like a sigh. Elowen traced faint shapes in the air with her finger. Stars and lines, stories untold. "That one," she said, pointing upward. "I used to call the maiden's crown." "And the one beside it?" Aldrich asked. "The guardian's flame." He smiled. "Then the sky tells our story too." She looked at him, her eyes bright as the stars. Perhaps it always did. Silence stretched between them, tender and full. Aldrich reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Elowen," he whispered. "Yes? There will come a day when this road must end, when castles remember their queens and fields call back their knights. When it comes, would you wish to go back?" She shook her head gently. "No. For what would I return to? The world I left no longer fits the heart I've found." He smiled faintly. "Then wherever we go next, let it be home." She touched his cheek, her voice soft as tide foam. "It already is." The wind rose then, carrying the scent of sea and moonlight. Waves curled and fell, endlessly, peacefully. Their fire burned low beside them, and above, the stars shimmered like scattered glass upon the water. Elowen whispered, half to herself. Perhaps the sea was never meant to be crossed, but to be heard, to remind us how vast love truly is. Aldrich drew her close, then let it whisper forever. They lay that way until sleep took them, two hearts resting against the rhythm of the waves, the night vast but gentle around them. Far out upon the horizon, the tide rose once more, whispering their names to the wind. And in the morning, when they woke to gulls and golden light, the sea was calm and shining, as though it had kept their promise in its depths. The wind carried the scent of wild thyme and heather as Aldrich and Elowen left the sea behind. The road wound upward through low, rolling hills that shimmered in gold beneath the late summer sun. Every step they took seemed to hum with the hush of time, as though the world itself paused to listen to them pass. They traveled without haste. The land was quiet, open, endless, a cradle of calm. Far in the distance, a single bell tolled from some unseen abbey, the sound soft and lingering. Elowen's cloak fluttered at her ankles, its edges kissed by the light. "It feels strange," she said after a time, "to walk where no walls watch me." Aldrich glanced toward her, smiling faintly. "Strange, perhaps, but freer too." "Freedom," she murmured, tasting the word as though it were new. "It used to frighten me. I thought it meant being alone. And now? Now it feels like breath." The road led them through meadows where tall grasses swayed and the hum of bees drifted lazily in the warmth. Butterflies hovered over bluebells, and the air was thick with sunlight and soft rustling. At midday, they stopped beneath an old oak that stood solitary in the field, its roots deep, its shadow cool. Aldrich set down his pack, and they shared bread and honey beside the sound of the wind in the branches. Elowen leaned back against the tree, eyes half closed. "If I were to build a kingdom," she murmured, "it would sound like this. Leaves whispering, bees singing, no crowns heavy enough to bow the head." Aldrich smiled. "Then I would gladly serve in such a kingdom." She opened one eye, a teasing glint within. "Serve?" He nodded solemnly. as the knight who guards its peace and its queen. Her laughter was soft as the breeze, a quiet kingdom indeed. For a long while they rested, the hush around them filled only with wind and birdsong. Aldrich watched a hawk spiral high above, and for a fleeting moment he thought of the years behind him, the clang of steel, the cries of war, the banners torn and burned. It all felt far away now, like a tale told in another lifetime. Elowyn's voice drew him back. "Aldrich," she said gently, "do you ever miss it? The life you left?" He considered. "Sometimes, but not for what it was, only for what I thought it could be. I once believed honor was found in the blade. Now I think it's found in the hand that does not strike." She reached out, her fingers brushing his. "Then you are more knightly now than ever before." He looked at her hand, delicate, warm, steady, and smiled. "And you more royal." The afternoon light deepened, soft gold spilling across the fields. They walked again, following a narrow path that wound between wildflowers and stones worn smooth by time. As the sun lowered, they came upon a clearing that took their breath. In its heart lay the ruins of an ancient hall. Pillars half-toppled, walls veiled in ivy. Around it, the meadow grew thick with daisies and white clover, and at its center stood a stone dais upon which rested a single broken crown. Elowyn stopped at its edge, her voice barely above a whisper. "This place," Aldrich stepped beside her. "It feels like memory." They moved slowly among the stones, their footsteps soft in the grass. The light slanted through the cracks in the ruin, painting lines of gold upon the old carvings. Birds had nested in the empty window arches, and moss covered the thrones that once had stood proud. Elowyn knelt before the broken crown. It was made of silver and gold, tarnished with age, half buried among flowers. She touched it gently, brushing away the dust. "A queen once sat here," she said quietly. "A woman who ruled, who dreamed, and then was forgotten." Aldrich's gaze softened. Not forgotten, only sleeping. She looked up at him, the fading sun reflected in her eyes. "Do you think all things sleep, then? Kingdoms, love, even hope?" "I think they wait," he said, "until hearts brave enough remember them." She smiled faintly. "Then perhaps we've woken something." They sat there for a time, surrounded by the hum of the meadow. The world seemed to hush around them, as though listening. Elowyn's gaze drifted toward the sky, now touched with rose and amber. "When I was a girl," she said softly, "I used to walk the palace gardens at dusk, pretend I was no princess, just a wanderer waiting for the wind to take me somewhere new. My nursemaid said it was folly. But I think—" She paused, her lips curving into a wistful smile. "I think I was waiting for this." Aldrich reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Then may the wind never stop guiding you." Her voice trembled gently. "As long as it guides me to you." The words lingered in the air, tender and full. The sun sank lower, and shadows stretched long through the ruins. The crown caught one last glimmer of light, shining faintly before dusk claimed it. Aldrich rose, offering her his hand. "Come. The night will be kind here." They built a small fire in the hollow of the fallen hall, its glow flickering over the stone and ivy. The scent of burning wood mixed with that of wild flowers, and as stars began to bloom above the open roof, the place felt less like a ruin and more like a sanctuary, a resting heart between past and present. Elowyn leaned close beside him, her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think," she murmured, "that we walk through the dreams of those who came before?" "Perhaps we do," he said softly, "and perhaps they walk with us still." Night descended with the softness of a sigh. The campfire glowed within the ancient stone circle, and shadows danced like slow ghosts upon the crumbled walls. Aldrich and Elowyn sat close, wrapped in the same cloak, the meadow whispering around them. The moon rose above the ruin, pale and calm, brushing silver across the fallen crown. It glimmered faintly as though remembering its old glory. Elowyn watched it, her eyes reflecting the flame. "Do you think a crown remembers the weight of the head that bore it?" Aldrich smiled faintly. "If it does, I hope it remembers kindness more than power." She leaned against him, her voice soft. "When I wore mine, I thought its weight would make me stronger, but it only made me smaller, as though each jewel was another wall between me and the world." He listened quietly, tracing circles upon her hand. "And now? Now I see that strength lies in gentleness," she whispered. "In quiet hearts, not in golden halls." He turned toward her, the firelight warm upon his face. "You speak like a queen still." Elowen smiled, perhaps, but one who no longer needs a throne. The fire crackled softly, and for a while neither spoke. The night hummed with the song of crickets and the rustle of leaves. Above them, the stars seemed closer than they had ever been, as if the heavens leaned in to listen. Elowen drew a small harp from her pack, its wood polished by travel and time. "My mother taught me this," she said quietly. "A song to ease restless hearts." Her fingers moved across the strings, and a melody like moonlight filled the air, tender, slow, and deep as a heartbeat. Aldrich closed his eyes, letting it wash through him. The notes seemed to settle the world itself, even the wind gentle to hear. When she finished, the silence that followed was sacred. Aldrich opened his eyes, voice rough with emotion. "The world grows still for you." Her smile trembled faintly. "Then perhaps I've given it one quiet gift." He reached for her hand and pressed it gently to his chest. "You've given it far more." They sat like that until the fire burned low, her head upon his shoulder, his arm around her. The ruins seemed to breathe around them, a relic of forgotten glory sheltering two who had chosen peace over crowns. Elowen's eyes drifted shut, and Aldrich watched her, the rise and fall of her breath, the stray curl against her cheek. She looked not like a princess nor a fugitive, but something rarer, a soul at rest. He thought then of how far they had come, from the castle walls to the open fields, from fear to freedom. And yet, the more they walked, the clearer it became that the journey was not toward a place, but toward each other. The fire sighed and the moon climbed higher. Somewhere an owl called, long, low, echoing through the ruins. Elowen stirred and murmured drowsily, "Aldrich, yes, my heart. If tomorrow brings parting, promise me you'll keep walking, even if I'm not beside you." He hesitated, pain flickering through his gaze. "Why speak of parting?" "Because the world is wide," she said softly, "and love, even when true, must sometimes rest in memory." He brushed a hand through her hair. "Then let it rest only when we do." Her lips curved faintly. "A knight's vow." "A vow, I mean." The meadow held its breath around them, listening. The stars shimmered as though to seal the promise. Morning crept slowly, silvering the ruins and painting dew across the grass. When Elowen woke, the world was wrapped in mist, soft veils that turned the meadow to a dream. Aldrich was already awake, feeding the small fire with twigs, his cloak damp with dew. She watched him for a moment, silent, then spoke. "You rise before the sun now." He smiled gently. "I like to see how the world begins its day, quiet and brave." They shared breakfast, then stood before the old dais one last time. Elowen placed a single wildflower, a daisy, within the broken crown. "Every queen deserves her peace," she murmured. Aldrich took her hand, and every heart its freedom. They turned toward the east, where the mist thinned and the path stretched onward, toward unknown lands, perhaps toward farewell. Behind them, the ruin gleamed faintly, as though it blessed their steps. As they walked, Elowen glanced back once more. "Do you think," she asked softly, "that love can outlast time?" Aldrich met her gaze, his eyes gentle. "If it's true, it doesn't end. It changes shape, like water, or wind, or light." She nodded slowly. "Then even if we fade, the world will remember us in its quiet places." He smiled. "In meadows, in firelight, in the hush of night." And so they walked on, their hands entwined, the sound of their steps mingling with the song of the meadow. The broken crown gleamed once more before the morning swallowed it, and then all was soft and golden again, just two souls moving through the wide, forgiving world. Autumn came softly, as though afraid to disturb the peace the summer had woven. The leaves turned to copper and flame, and the wind carried the scent of wood smoke and rain. Aldrich and Elowen followed the winding road eastward, through forests that whispered and valleys bathed in gold. Each morning began with mist curling through the trees, and each night ended by firelight, where they spoke little and listened much. One evening, as the sun sank low, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast valley. There, a river wound like silver thread through the land, and beyond it, distant lights glowed faintly. Lanterns, hundreds of them, scattered like fallen stars along a hidden path. Elowen caught her breath. "The lantern road," she whispered. Aldrich turned to her, brow furrowed. "You know it?" She nodded. "Old tales say it marks the border between kingdoms. A road that souls once walked, guided by the living's light. Few see it now." They watched as the lamps flickered in the dusk, the air trembling with quiet magic. The wind carried the faint sound of bells, and somewhere in the distance, water sang softly over stones. Aldrich said, "Then perhaps the world still remembers how to guide its wanderers." They descended toward the valley, their cloaks brushing through fallen leaves. As they neared the lanterns, the glow seemed to breathe, gentle, pulsing, as though the road itself were alive. Each lantern hung from a slender post or branch, swaying faintly in the breeze. The glass was old, misted with age, yet each flame within burned steady. The path wound onward, vanishing into the forest's heart. They followed it in silence. The air felt heavy with memory, but not sorrowful, only full, like a heart that had lived many lives. Elowen brushed her fingers against one lantern as she passed. The flame trembled, flared, then steadied again. "It's warm," she murmured, "as though it knows us." "Perhaps it does," Aldrich said softly. "Perhaps every light remembers those who once sought warmth." The path led them to a stone bridge arching over a narrow river. Moss grew along its sides, and beneath, the water glimmered with reflections of the lanterns. They paused at its center. Elowen leaned on the railing, watching the current. "It feels like crossing into a dream." Aldrich nodded, "And dreams have always been kinder than kingdoms." She smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "Do you ever wish we could stay in one?" "Perhaps we already are," he said, "and only the waking has not yet come." The sound of the river filled the silence. The night air was cool and fragrant, a mixture of pine, rain, and something sweeter, like distant lilacs. As they crossed, the wind lifted Elowen's cloak, sending it billowing, like a shadow of night itself. Aldrich reached to steady her, his hand brushing hers, and for a heartbeat, the lanterns nearest them flared brighter, casting golden halos across the stones. Elowen looked around, wonder in her gaze. "They listen," she whispered, "to love, to promises, to the softest things." Aldrich smiled. "Then let them remember this." He drew her close and kissed her gently beneath the light of the swaying lanterns. The world seemed to hush, the flames steadying in quiet reverence. When they parted, the night felt changed, deeper yet softer, as though love itself had left its mark upon the air. They walked until the moon was high, and the road widened into a clearing surrounded by tall pines. At its center stood a great stone archway, ancient and overgrown, and beyond it lay a faint shimmer, like mist made of light. Elowen slowed, awe softening her voice. "This is where the lantern road ends." Aldrich studied the archway, or begins again. The shimmer pulsed faintly, rhythmic, as if breathing. It cast no shadow and made no sound, but its glow was peaceful, not beckoning, only waiting. Elowen's hand found his. "Do you think it's real?" He smiled gently. "Does it matter? We've found enough truth in dreams." They stood together beneath the arch, watching the light ripple across the grass. Elowen's eyes glistened, And for the first time, there was a trace of sorrow there, not fear, only the soft ache of knowing that every journey, even the kindest one, must one day rest. Aldrich brushed her cheek with his thumb. "What are you thinking?" "That the world feels too beautiful to leave," she whispered. He drew her close, his forehead resting against hers. "Then we will stay in its memory." The lanterns flickered in a slow, steady rhythm, one by one, like heartbeats fading into stillness. The air was filled with warmth, with the smell of pine, and the faint taste of tears neither could name. They made camp near the archway that night. The flames of their small fire mirrored the lantern's glow, and above them the stars shone clear and kind. As Elowen drifted to sleep, Aldrich remained awake, watching the shimmer beyond the arch. It pulsed like a living heart, soft, steady, infinite. He whispered to it, though no one could hear, "Let her dreams be gentle. Let the road remember us kindly." The light seemed to answer, flickering once then returning to its calm glow. He smiled faintly, lay down beside her, and closed his eyes to the sound of the lantern swaying in the wind. Morning came like a sigh, soft, silver, and slow. Mist clung to the ground, curling around the base of the old archway and the sleeping lanterns. Dew glistened on the grass like tears turned to pearls. Elowen woke first. For a long moment she simply lay there, listening to the quiet. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Aldrich stirred beside her, his hair damp with dew. "The world's too still," he murmured, his voice low. "Maybe it waits," she said, "for us to decide whether to go on." They rose and walked once more to the archway. The shimmer beyond it still danced faintly, like sunlight through clear water. It seemed neither menacing nor inviting, only peaceful. Elowen reached out her hand, stopping just before her fingers touched the light. "It feels warm," she whispered. Aldrich's gaze softened. "Then it cannot be a thing of fear." She turned toward him, searching his face. "Do you think it's the end?" He took a slow breath, his eyes on the endless road behind them. "Perhaps not the end. Perhaps the beginning of wherever hearts go when they've done their wandering." Elowen smiled faintly. "Then we've wandered well." They sat together near the archway, their backs against the stone. The air smelled faintly of rain and pine. Somewhere far off, a lark sang, a thin, bright thread of sound weaving through the mist. Aldrich watched the light play across her face, the gentle lines, the calm in her eyes. "Do you remember," he said quietly, "the first night by the fire?" She nodded. "You burned your bread," he laughed softly. "And you laughed as though you'd never known sorrow." "I had," she said, "but for the first time, it didn't feel so heavy." He reached for her hand. "Then I did something right." The shimmer pulsed again, brighter for a heartbeat, then dimmed, as though echoing his words. Elowen's gaze turned distant. "I wonder if the world will tell our story, if the wind will whisper it, or the stars remember." "It will," Aldrich said, with quiet certainty. "Every flame we lit, every step we took. The world has seen it. Love never fades, it only changes its name." She smiled through tears. "And what name will ours take?" He thought for a moment, then said softly, "Peace." They sat in silence for a long time, the mist curling around them like a gentle veil. The lanterns flickered one by one, their flames growing pale as the morning brightened. At last, Elowen stood and faced the archway. "Aldrich," she said, "I think it's calling." He rose beside her. "Then let us answer." She hesitated, her eyes searching his. "Are you afraid?" He smiled, tender and steady. "Only of waking, if this is the dream." She took his hand, their fingers intertwining. Together they stepped forward. The shimmer met them like soft water, cool but kind. The moment they passed through, the lanterns flared, all of them. A wave of light rippling down the road until even the farthest glimmer burned bright as day. The wind rose, carrying with it a sound, not words, not music, but something between, like memory itself exhaling, and then the light faded. When the mist cleared, the archway stood empty. The lanterns still swayed in the breeze, their flames now still and steady, and the valley seemed to breathe again. Some say that travelers who come upon that place feel warmth in the air, a comfort they cannot name. Some say they hear two voices in the wind, soft and laughing, like leaves brushing in summer. The old woman in the fishing village tells of a dream she once had, of a knight and a princess walking hand in hand down a road of light, their faces calm, their hearts at rest. And the meadow of forgotten crowns, wild daisies bloom brighter each spring. The world remembers, it always does. Some nights, when the moon is kind and the wind sighs low, one might glimpse two shadows moving beside a campfire that burns where no wood lies, just flame and memory. He holds her close, and she leans into him, her voice a whisper against the quiet night. "I told you, Aldrich," she murmurs. "The world will remember." And he answers, with that same old warmth, then it remembers rightly. The stars shimmer above them, gentle and eternal, and the sound of the lanterns swaying in the unseen breeze fills the silence like a lullaby. The last lantern flickers once, then steadies, its flames small, constant, unending. There are places where time forgets to move, quiet hollows between one breath and the next, and it was into such a hollow that Aldrich and Elowen seemed to step when they crossed the shimmering arch. The world beyond was neither night nor day, but something softer, a twilight that breathed. Light floated in the air like dust caught in a sunbeam, and the ground beneath their feet felt warm, like earth long touched by gentle fire. They stood hand in hand, surrounded by a vast, endless plain of stillness. A breeze whispered faintly, though there were no trees, no grass, only light, endless and deep. Elowen looked around, awe touching her voice. "Where are we?" Aldrich's reply was low, reverent, "Wherever peace chooses to rest." She turned to him, her eyes full of quiet wonder. "It feels like being inside a heartbeat." He smiled faintly, then let it be the world's. They began to walk. Each step they took left a faint shimmer behind, fading after a moment like ripples in water. There was no horizon, yet the space did not feel empty. It was alive, not with noise or color, but with stillness, the kind that listens. Elowen lifted her hand. "Look," she said softly. Her fingers glowed faintly, like moonlight made flesh. "Are we dreaming?" "Perhaps," Aldrich said. "But if we are, let us not wake." They walked for what felt like both moments and eternities, until they came upon a single flame, a small steady light floating in the air. It burned without smoke, without heat, golden as honey, soft as dawn. Elowen approached it, her voice no more than breath. "The eternal fire." Aldrich joined her, eyes wide. "Do you know it?" "I've heard it in stories," she said. "A flame that burns where love has fulfilled its promise, neither life nor death, but what lies between." They stood before it, the light reflecting in their eyes. It pulsed slowly, like a heart, not consuming, only existing. Around them, the air shimmered with warmth and quiet grace. Aldrich reached out a hand, but stopped short of touching. "It feels wrong to disturb it." Elowen smiled softly. "Then let us only stand near it, as we once did by the campfire." He turned to her. "That night, I thought the world was ending. Yet now I think it was only beginning." Her eyes glistened. Every end carries a seed of beginning. They sat together before the flame. It hummed faintly, not a sound exactly, but a feeling deep and steady, like peace breathing. Elowen leaned against him. "Do you think this is where all love comes to rest?" "Perhaps," he said, his voice low. "Or perhaps this is what love becomes when the world no longer needs to hold it." The flame flickered gently, and within its glow, faint images danced. Memories, half-formed. A campfire under the stars, rain upon a thatched roof, a crown of daisies upon fallen stone. 2 hands joined beneath the sea wind. Elowen watched, her eyes bright with tears. It remembers everything. Aldrich nodded slowly. Then we are truly here. She turned to him, her voice trembling like a soft chord. Aldrich, if this is where we are to remain, will you still hold me when even the stars fade? He smiled, his hand finding hers, until even silence forgets its name. The light flared softly around them, warm and gold, and for a long time neither spoke, only sat before that eternal fire, their hearts steady in the endless calm. There was no hunger, no cold, no sorrow, only being, pure and quiet. The light moved through them gently, like wind through wheat. At last, Elowen whispered, if this is eternity, then it is kinder than I dared to hope. Aldrich's eyes were soft. Then we've earned it. He drew her close, and they rested together as the flame's glow deepened, no longer just gold, but streaked with soft rose and white, like dawn breaking through forever. Time, if it still existed, folded around them. The flame pulsed once more, and their forms seemed to dissolve gently into its glow. Not lost, but changed. 2 shapes of light, seated side by side, holding hands before a flame that would never die. And though no voice was heard, the air whispered with what might have been their last words, or perhaps their first ones anew. Love is not a moment, it said. It is the quiet that remains. When the light began to dim, not fade, but soften, a new hush fell upon that boundless plain. The flame before which they had rested no longer seemed alone. From its heart, 1,000 faint embers began to drift outward, slow as snow, each carrying a memory. They floated gently, spreading into the distance, some settling like stars across the unseen sky, others sinking into the warm earth below. It was as though the world itself had taken up their story and was setting it carefully among the constellations. Aldrich stirred first. He had not moved in what might have been centuries or a breath. It was impossible to tell. Yet when he opened his eyes, there was no weariness in them, only serenity, and a strange, familiar knowing. Elowen, he whispered. She stirred beside him, eyes shimmering softly like candlelight on water. I am here. He smiled, the gesture faint but full of peace. I dreamed you might fade. She shook her head. We are past fading, my love. We have become the warmth that others feel when they light their fires on lonely nights. Aldrich's gaze turned toward the horizonless glow. So this is what remains of us. Not form, not name, but feeling. Yes, she said softly. And isn't that what we always were? The feeling that would not end? He took her hands. They were light now, translucent, but still familiar in every way that mattered. Then hold me as you did before, he murmured, and she did, for a moment, or perhaps for all time. They sat as they had on that first night, his arms around her, her head upon his shoulder, the soft rhythm of her breath against his heart. Around them, the flame pulsed once, twice, then began to divide, like a flower opening to morning. Within its glow, new scenes appeared. A maiden tending a fire in a quiet village, feeling warmth though she was alone. A soldier returning home to find courage in a remembered whisper. A child clutching a dream of love he had never known but somehow believed in. The eternal fire was spreading, not ending but sharing itself. Elowen watched, her eyes luminous. Do you see? Our love does not vanish. It becomes 1,000 small kindnesses. Aldrich nodded slowly. Every fire lit in tenderness will carry a spark of us. He looked down and for a heartbeat saw not light but the reflection of an old memory. A young knight kneeling by a campfire, rain soft upon his armor. A princess with laughter like chimes leaning close. Her eyes full of the world's gentlest courage. He could smell the rain again, the wood smoke, the faint perfume of her hair. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." Elowen smiled. "Thank you for holding me through every storm." The light grew brighter around them, not burning but wrapping them in a warmth too deep for words. And then, Slowly, their shapes dissolved completely. Two hearts merging into the great golden flame, no longer separate, no longer bound by time. Where they had sat, only light remained. For those who wandered through forests or along lonely battlements in ages to come, there would sometimes appear, in the quietest hours of night, a small golden fire burning where no hand had lit it. Its glow would soothe the heart, and its whisper would sound like a promise. You are not alone. Love waits where the fire is warm. And though no one ever saw the knight or the princess again, songs began to gather in the kingdoms beyond. Songs of a campfire that never died, and two souls who loved so gently that even eternity could not forget their touch. It was said that if you listened closely to the crackle of the flame, you could still hear his voice. Deep, calm, steady as the old oaths of knighthood, murmuring to her, "I will hold you close, my heart, until the stars themselves grow tired." And her reply, soft as starlight, "Then let us be the stars." So the flame burned on, age after age, a quiet beacon for dreamers and lovers alike, the warmth of all who had ever loved, and all who ever would. In a world of changing kings, vanishing castles, and forgotten songs, that single, eternal light remained. And somewhere, in the soft whisper of wind through the trees or the hush between waves upon a moonlit shore, one might still feel the gentle presence of two souls resting forever in each other's glow. Long after the kingdoms that Aldrich and Elwyn had known had crumbled into moss and memory, the land still carried their story, not in books or banners, but in whispers that lingered between the hills. In the valley once known as Ardenmere, where their first campfire had burned, stood now a forest so old that even the oldest trees had forgotten their own beginnings. Beneath those green boughs, the air was always calm, birdsong soft, the wind patient. Travelers who passed through often spoke of feeling watched, but not with fear, rather with the strange comfort of being seen, known, and gently understood. They said that if one lit a fire there at night, the smoke rose straighter than anywhere else, as though the sky itself leaned down to listen. And sometimes, just sometimes, the fire burned gold in one such night of late autumn, when the stars hung low and the first frost laced the leaves. A young minstrel named Caerwyn wandered into that forest. His cloak was thin, his harp older than his hands, and his heart heavy with the kind of loneliness that only the road can teach. He sought no legend that night, only rest. He found a small clearing by the stream and gathered dry branches, humming softly to himself as he built his fire. The tune he played was one he did not remember learning, a slow and wistful melody that seemed to come from the air itself. When the fire caught, the light that rose from it was not the orange of common flame, but a tender gold, deep and living. It startled him at first, then calmed him in the same breath. He sat by it, shivering less, his eyes half closed. The crackle of the fire sounded like whispers, gentle and old. "Do you hear it too?" a voice asked. Caerwyn turned, startled. Behind him stood an old woman, wrapped in a cloak the color of ashes and snow. Her eyes were clear, her smile faint but kind. "I didn't hear you come," he said, rising. "No one ever does," she said, lowering herself to the ground beside the fire. "You've found the resting place of the eternal flame." Caerwyn frowned. "I've heard the name in tavern tales, a lover's fire that never dies. But I thought it only a song." "Songs are only truths softened by time," she murmured. "Sit, minstrel. You play their melody without knowing." He sat again, hesitant. Whose melody? The woman looked into the fire, and her face reflected the glow of two figures, faint, but there, a knight in weathered armor, a maiden in a gown of moonlight. They sat close, hands entwined, watching the flames. "The knight and the princess," she said softly. "Their love burned once by this very stream, so strong, so gentle, it refused to die. The world changed, but their warmth remained." Caerwyn felt the hair on his neck rise. "You speak as though you knew them. In a way we all do," she replied. "Every heart that has ever loved has felt the echo of theirs. But you," she turned her gaze to him, "you were meant to give them voice again." He blinked. "Me? You have wandered long, singing songs of sorrow and leaving none of your own. But tonight, you sit before the flame that remembers. Listen well, Cerwyn, for it whispers only once to each soul." The wind hushed, the stream stilled, only the fire moved, its light deepening, curling around them like a living breath. And in that golden glow, Cerwyn heard it, the soft rhythm of two voices entwined, not words but feelings, warmth, longing, peace. He could feel their love as soundless music, gentle as the turning of the world. His fingers moved without thought across his harp strings, following that unseen tune. The melody flowed, slow, serene, endless as dawn. It spoke of moonlight upon armor, of rain upon stone, of laughter beneath sorrow, of a promise kept beyond the reach of time. When the song ended, the forest was utterly still. Even the fire seemed to bow its head. The old woman smiled faintly. "Now it will live again." "What will?" he whispered. "The truth," she said. "That love, when pure and patient, outlives all empires. That a single act of tenderness can set eternity alight." She rose slowly. "Guard that song, well, minstrel. The world needs its warmth." He looked up. "Wait, who are you?" But she was already fading, her outline turning to light. Her voice lingered, soft as a lullaby. Only one who once walked in their glow. Then she was gone. Cerwyn sat alone again, the golden fire dwindling to soft amber. He touched his harp once more, but the melody had changed, gentler now, filled with peace. He wrote it down in the dirt before him, shaping the words he had heard without truly hearing. By the campfire's light they stayed, while the world slept cold and gray. His vow, her hand, the stars above. The night remembers the fire of love. He sang until dawn, and when he left the clearing, the embers behind him glowed one last time, then vanished, leaving no ash, no trace. Only warmth in the air, like the sigh of a contented heart. Years turned again, as they always do. The song spread from Cerwyn's lips to those of others, across kingdoms, through markets and courts, over seas and deserts. Each singer changed it slightly, as all songs change. Yet one thing never altered. Whenever it was sung beside a fire, the flames glowed just a little brighter. Children grew up hearing of the knight and the princess, though their names shifted with the tongues that told them. Alaric and Eleonora in one land, Ardent and Elise in another. But always they were two souls who held each other close beneath the sky of stars, who promised that love would outlast even the silence of death. And whenever a storm threatened to snuff a fire, or loneliness bent the heart low, someone would murmur, half to themselves, "Love waits where the fire is warm." Thus, centuries became centuries more, and though the castles fell to dust and the songs faded to lullabies, the warmth endured, a secret kindness woven through the bones of the earth. One last tale is told, from an age nearer our own. It is said that on winter nights, deep in Ardenmere, the travelers who dare to camp by the river still wake to find two faint shapes sitting across from them on the other side of the fire, not frightening, but serene. A man in simple armor, a woman with her head upon his shoulder. They never speak, and when dawn comes, they vanish. Yet the travelers always report the same thing, that the fire burned golden, and that they slept without dreams of fear or sorrow. Some even claim to have awoken with tears on their cheeks, not of sadness, but of peace. And though few believe such tales anymore, the villagers nearby still keep a small stone altar by the forest's edge. Upon it sits a single candle, which has burned for as long as anyone remembers. No wind can snuff it, no rain can quench it. When the nights grow long and hearts grow weary, the villagers gather round that flame, singing softly the oldest verse they know. When all is gone, and stars grow cold, when kingdoms fade, and hearts grow old, still by the fire in golden hue, the night shall hold his love so true, The candle flickers, and for a moment, if one watches closely, two faint figures seem to dance within the light. A knight and a princess, forever seated side by side. And then the flame steadies, warm and bright, the same warmth that once belonged to two souls who found, within a world of sorrow, a peace strong enough to never end. So the legend remains that love is not the fever of a moment, nor the sorrow of parting, but the quiet warmth that lingers long after the night is gone. And somewhere, perhaps within the heart of every fire that burns kindly, the night still holds the princess close and whispers across eternity, "Sleep, my love. The night is gentle now."